Check, check, check.
So, mental health.
Mental health, yes. So,
And it's North Hills Church.
North Hills Church, yep.
'Cause I was sitting upstairs going, it's not a community anymore.
We
It's
ditched,
church.
yeah, we're no longer community. For our White Elephant staff Christmas party like 2-3 years ago, I made a hat that said "Make North Hills Community Again." It's like a little trucker hat. And yeah, no longer community, just North Hills Church.
Yeah, okay.
I think it's easier to market.
And you still have your Wadsworth.com?
TimWadsworth.com. Yep. How long do we have?
25, 28 minutes.
Perfect. Good.
Okay. Ready?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, welcome in. This is Heidi Aiken with Tim Wadsworth from North Hills Church, the youth pastor there, and we're just glad to have you back again.
Yes.
You're like my favorite guest.
Oh, goodness. Well, that means the world to me because I love coming.
On a repeat basis, we have Tim
Yeah.
back, and we always talk about things that sometimes are hard to talk about, and today's
Yes.
one of those topics.
Yeah, so I would love for us just to take a little bit of time just to talk about mental health. And I know this isn't a popular thing to talk about. There are people who have varying opinions, and sometimes it can be a touchy subject.
Mm-hmm.
What I want to make really clear is I am not a licensed counselor. I am not a therapist. What I can do, though, as a pastor is walk people through how to love people really well.
Mm-hmm.
And when we do enter these conversations, how to have grace and mercy in these hard conversations, because that's what we've discussed in the last couple times together, is how to navigate hard conversations. So as parents, as coaches, mentors, grandparents, fill in the blank, we need to at least have a sharpened tool on how to not do damage in these conversations. Even if we're not a licensed counselor, even if we're not a therapist, there are still 4 or 5 things that we can do to love people well in those hard conversations when it comes to the topic of mental health. So I'll say this, even though I'm not the licensed counselor or a therapist, I am speaking out of a little bit experience only because my wife, a big part of her story is anxiety, depression, getting in funks, and having to work through that. And as a husband, as someone who I tend to be a go-getter, get up in the morning, let's go, I can tend to look at those people and say, hey, walk it off.
Snap out of it.
Snap out of it.
And
Yep.
it's just not that easy.
Well, it's not. It's almost like looking at someone with a broken leg and saying, walk it off.
Right.
Like, no, there's something broken here. And not just in the person as a whole. Like, there could be something just not right.
Chemical.
Right.
Biological.
And sometimes in the Christian community, in the world that I work in, like if you do go on medicine or if you start going down those roads, you're almost looked at not having enough faith or God can heal it. And if you do, go on medicine, then that's like throwing up the white flag. And there couldn't be anything farther from the truth with that. And so we found the right medication, just to kind of clear the fog, for her to be able to see some things clearer than she could before. I mean, modern medicine is a gift. Just like if you are getting a cavity, Novocaine is a great thing. Like no one walks into the dentist and they're like, nope, just go for it.
Yeah, no.
No one does that.
No.
And so I would love just for us to focus in on some core truths and some core values that we can have in these conversations with people. So can we jump into those?
Absolutely.
Okay, number 1, we always, no matter where the conversation goes or no matter who it's with or whatever the case is, we as the people that are pouring into these others need to let them know that they matter. Plain and simple, no matter how bad, no matter how good, no matter how confused, no matter how broken the situation could be, our language needs to keep being, you know what? Like, I know this is hard, and I'm with you in this, but you need to know this. You matter. You matter to me. You matter to your family. You matter to your church family. You matter to your school, and you walk them through this. You matter. Sometimes when it comes to the issue of mental health, a lot of people that I have counseled feel like they're less than. They feel like their brokenness is different from someone else's brokenness. And I just want to define what I mean by brokenness. When both my sons were born, no one had to teach them how to be mean. No one had to teach them how to lie. No one taught Levi how to punch Judah when Judah took his toy. There seems to be something in us that is not right. But we have to teach how to be kind, how to be loving, and how to be patient. So the churchy language would be sin. Like we would say we're all sinners, we're all broken. You're no better than that person. We're all, by God's grace, trying our best to love each other. So when I say broken, that's what I mean. Like I think we live in a world that is just not the way it's supposed to be. And so mental health can be one of those fractions in the brokenness of this world and in the brokenness of ourselves. Like I can talk about my brokenness. It just looks different probably from yours. Like I have a short temper. Spend time with my wife. She would say, yeah, his brokenness is he's got a short fuse, you know, and I'm constantly reminded of that with a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old.
Step back.
Yeah. So I just want to be really clear. When I'm talking about brokenness, that's what I mean. We all have our struggles. We all have things that we are working through. So I think whoever's listening to this, whether it's a conversation that catches you on the fly or whether it's an ongoing one, they need to know without a shadow of a doubt that they matter, that they're not less than, they have purpose. I believe we were all created in the image of God, and so we all have value just because of that. God loves you, Heidi, and so that's why I have love for you. God loves all of my neighbors, and so that's why I have love for whoever I come into contact with. So because people matter to God, they matter to me. And so I think that's just one area that we can just really love them well. And even if they don't feel like they're processing it, maybe later in the week those words will ring true. So we need to let people know, and this could really be applicable to anything that we're coaching people through in hard conversations, that they matter and they're important and they're valuable. Number 2, no matter what conversation we're having with mental health, like people need to know that their story is valid. Their story is valid. So sometimes I go into detective mode, and this is not helpful. I'll listen to people and say, like in my mind, I don't think you're telling the truth. Like I don't know if you have all the facts. Are you fabricating this? Like, are you someone who stretches the truth? And so what I try and do is wear 2 different hats. I want that person to believe that I'm believing everything they're saying. But that doesn't mean I check my brain at the door, right? Like I still have a brain. I can still filter what is true and what isn't. But sometimes if you know you're talking to someone who isn't thinking clearly on an issue, if you treat them like someone who isn't dealing with mental health, you're going to lose the battle. I don't know if that makes sense. So if I'm talking with someone who maybe isn't dealing with depression, they're not going to process things the same as someone who's not depressed.
Okay.
So we can't treat someone based on how we would want to be treated because we're seeing things different. So they need to know that their story is valid. Like, I hear you. Thank you for that, and I believe you. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to nitpick. Like we don't want to nitpick. We don't want to say, well, last time I talked to you, you said it was 30%, and now you're saying 40%. And now they're going to feel like they're getting judged or they're getting
grilled.
Right.
Yeah.
And what we want them, and whatever our language is, to say, I'm with you, and I believe you, this is hard.
Well, you have to be that understanding, fair, not judgmental listener when someone comes to you.
Yes. Yeah. And then once you can see some growth, once you see they're heading in the right direction, then maybe that hard conversation can look a different kind of hard. You know, like, hey, I've noticed that when I talk with you, you're inconsistent with these things, but be appropriate when you bring up new mountains for them to climb. Like, let's just focus on the one mountain, validate that mountain, and maybe as the mentor, as the coach, as the parent, a year from now, we're going to tackle these different mountains that we've noticed. But it might not be a good time to throw all the mountains at the person. They already feel like they're drowning. They don't need to feel like this is kind of the nail in the coffin.
Overwhelmed.
Yeah, and if you say, man, your story is so valid. It's a lot of that language of you matter to me. Did you see that commercial over the holidays? It literally wanted to make me cry every time I saw it. It was this older man, and you can tell his kids grew up, and they got married, and they had their own kids, and they used to come over for Thanksgiving. They used to come over for Christmas and holidays, But then, like, the timeline showed that over the years, they just stopped. They got busy. And then the commercial would show, like, he would decorate the table and light candles and would wait for them to come, and they would never come.
Oh, no.
So then the commercial shows that he passed away. And they got all the brothers and the sisters to get together and talk and plan a trip out for the funeral and come to Dad's house to clean it out. And so all the siblings come through the door, and they see that the table is perfectly set.
Stop, I'm going to cry.
There are candles lit, and the dad comes behind the corner. He wasn't dead.
He played like he was just to get the kids out there.
Yes, and so the point he was trying to make is the only way I can get the whole family together is if you think I died. And it was so impactful. Like, and if you were to talk to those siblings, of course their dad matters. Like, of course. If they were taking a quiz, true or false, does your dad matter to you? All of them would put true, but sometimes actions speak louder than words.
Yeah.
So in the language of you matter, in the language of your story is valid, actions speak louder than words. And so here's another thing we have to be really important in doing. We have to be consistent with these people. We have to be consistent. When we say, I want to meet with you for coffee, or I want to talk with you on the phone, or let's get our families together, actions will speak louder than words when it comes to letting them know they matter and that their story is valid and it's worth your time. The greatest resource we have on planet Earth is time. You can't earn it back. You can't get it back. Once it's gone, it's gone. So if you give someone your time, that's going to really make them know they matter. And that's going to really validate what they're going through and to validate their story and that they're important. So think through who in your life have you meant you wanted to meet with, or like you've meant well, but you just haven't followed through. This is big for me. Like I'm someone who sometimes I can be a mile wide and an inch deep with relationships, so I think I'm really close with people.
Yeah.
My wife gives me a hard time because I'll always say, oh yeah, he's my best friend.
Oh, my good friend.
My good friend.
Yeah.
And my wife's like, you are not best friends with that person. I'm like, yeah, sure I am. We got coffee like, I guess like back in 2016, right? And so people that are wired like me, we have to be very intentional because if you were my friend outside of here, if we got together once a year, my tank is full. I'm good. But if I were to get together with my so-called good friends once a year, I'm a terrible friend.
Yeah.
Right? And so we just have to be really aware of meeting consistently. You matter. The greatest thing you can do is give people your time. So if you're listening to this, think, who should I be giving my time to?
I heard that about a child, that if you show that child that you set aside your very important time, not for business, but for them, and you have a set appointment with them that you don't break because of business, that just makes them feel that much more special.
Yes. So if someone's listening to this and you're like, I have such a busy schedule, like I'm barely keeping up with my own spouse or my own kids, and I think the greatest weapon you can use in that consistency of loving people with your time is the rain check. So you always honor a rain check. So let's say something does come up. I get a flat tire. I get sick. I'm busy. I double booked. You call that person and say, hey, you matter to me. Let's get a rain check in, and I will honor that rain check. And come hell or high water, you honor the rain check. And so there's been times I've called people, but they know it wasn't flippant. It wasn't like, oops, you were the last thing kind of on my mind, and there was other things that were important. So rain checks. Rain checks. So if you're listening to this, think to yourself, who do I need to give my time to? It's not social media. Stop scrolling. It's not staying up late watching football. It's not politics. Like that stuff comes and goes. Like relationships are the most important. That's why in God's word it says, Jesus said the greatest commandment is love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. The second greatest commandment is love your neighbor as yourself. The second greatest thing that Jesus told us to do is love people. And so I think the most loving thing you can do is give your most valuable resource, and that is your time. Okay, moving on. You need to let them know that you care for them in their darkest times. So there's a difference in conditional and unconditional. And so as a student pastor, I'm always trying to let kids know that my love for you does not have conditions. Like, I don't love you when things are good. I don't love you when you're performing well. I love you when you're not performing well. I love you when you bring nothing to the table. And so that's hard, to have a relationship that doesn't offer anything. And here's what I mean by that. In actuality, it does offer everything. But so many times we're very selfish. It's, what can I get out of this friendship? What good is it for me? I don't want this to drain me. I don't want this. Like, I remember growing up, I used to hear this. I need to be around VIP people, not VDP people. So VDP was very draining people. I was told to stay away from VDP people. They're just draining people. Every time you're around them, it's just like...
Well, I've heard the word toxic, too.
Yes. Now, I think there's a difference in toxic and somewhat draining people. Like, if there's a cancerous friendship and relationship, yeah, weed that out if it's not healthy. But sometimes, if you know you're going to be around people who can suck the life out of you, you have to... Number one, find the blessing in the weeds, because it's there. Sometimes you can learn more from people who you think are draining than you think. So get off your high horse. You're not better than them. Like, don't call them VDP people. Like, it's a diamond in the rough kind of situation. But for me, if I'm always counseling people, if I'm always pouring, I've got to make sure there's people pouring into me. I got to make sure I'm resting well. And so, yes, we need to let people know that we care for them in an unconditional way. The best way I can care for the people of North Hills Church is to care for myself. So, second greatest commandment, love your neighbor as you what? Love yourself. Now, there's a selfish love for yourself, and I think there's a biblical, healthy love for yourself. When I got up this morning, I showered. I like myself, right? Like, I take care of myself.
Right.
If I'm not taking care of Tim, how in the world am I going to take care and love others really well? So I know this seems like kind of a footnote to loving people in their brokenness, in depression, anxiety, mental health, which the list could be a mile long. You've got to take care of yourself. And when you take care of yourself, you can have an energized battery to love people without conditions. I mean, there's so many times I've wanted to look at people and say, this is it. I'm done. I'm done with you. Like, have you heard any of the words I've said? And then, like, you do really well for a month. You meet with them 4 or 5 times, and on that 6th time, you're done. And that's when the really hurtful things are said, and that's when the bridge is just broken. And maybe you started tackling more mountains too soon. You need to spend a little bit more time on that mountain. And so the greatest thing we can do in letting people know they matter and that their story is valid to you, and as you validate them, let them know, I'm with you in your darkest times. I love you unconditionally. Why? Well, because Jesus does that for us. God's word says that while we were sinners, Christ died for us. Right? There was nothing for him to gain other than his own glory there, but we're to imitate Jesus. If you look at who Jesus went after, like, okay, let's just talk about his disciples. The 12 that he called were nobodies. They were just fishermen. Like, they weren't of high regard. They weren't people that were like, hey, you need them on your team. They are all-stars. Go after them. And Jesus is like, no, I'll take them. Yeah. I remember when I was in youth group, my youth pastor would always tell me to choose, like when you're picking teams for dodgeball, choose the people who you would choose last. Because number one, you're letting others kind of see that you're a leader. You're taking people under your wings that necessarily you don't want under your wing, and they're not going to help you, right? But I remember going to PE, and we would pick teams, and I would say, all right, Jeff, come on. And the look on his face was, what? Do you not see the other people who are available to pick? But the way their shoulders would perk up, the confidence they got, even if you lost. Okay, we lost the game of dodgeball badly, but we won in the game of life, in relationships. So, all that to say, if you're a mentor, a coach, parent, whoever, the greatest thing, the greatest investment you can tell your kids is, hey, Dad loves you even if you get D's. And my love for you is not going to increase if you get A's. My love for you is consistent. Like, I don't love you based off of what you do or what you bring to the table. I love you based off of who you are and who you belong to. Again, I love the people I encounter, and I really don't want to. I'll be honest. Like, there are some people that I'm like, if God did not tell me to love you, like, you don't want to know what's going on in my head. You know, like if you think what I'm saying now is mean, you should have thought, like, what are the things he's not saying? But I want people to treat me like that. I'm not always worthy of compassion and kindness and love. And sometimes when I remember I'm not worthy, it helps you kind of look at others as worthy. Mm-hmm. Humble yourself. Love people. Try and win at the game of life that doesn't really look like you're winning. Culture will say you're winning if you're good looking and you have lots of money in the bank and you have nice things. But like, are you winning? Like, can that nice car go in your casket with you in the next 40 years? Where's that money going? It's just going to go to someone else. Like, where are you winning? And that's really what Jesus came to do, is say, hey, if you want to gain your life, you have to lose it. And Jesus talks about ways to lose your life, to be a living sacrifice. But really, this is kingdom work. Like, what we're doing is eternal work here. So God cares for them in their darkest times. So because God cares for them in their darkest times, so can I. But small commercial, if you're going to do this, you have to have self-care. And then lastly, they need to know that you're a safe person and you can help them find safe people. You're a safe person. And so that's going to look really, really different depending on the situation and depending on how you're wired. But you need to keep telling them that.
You know, we're having a conversation with Tim Wadsworth, who's youth pastor at North Hills Church, about mental health. Having those hard conversations with someone that you love or someone that you know or someone that's come to you for help and guidance. Yeah. Ways to, open the conversation and ways to strengthen yourself to be a good listener.
Yeah. And as we wrap this up, think of ways that you can be a safe person and that you gain credibility. And here's the deal. That valuable resource of time, it's going to take time. There are people that I have met with for 2-3 years. And after that 2-3 years, then they realize, okay, I think Tim's a safe person. And after like one meeting, I'm like, oh yeah, I wooed them. They know I'm a safe person. Like, this is going to go the direction I want. It's now, some people, if it's a middle school student, they're a little easier to win. And I deal with middle and high school students. So sometimes an 8th grader, man, you make a fart joke, high five them, give them a Mountain Dew and a slice of pizza.
And your best friend.
You're the man. Yeah. That gets a little more complicated in the high school, college, and beyond.
That's a tough age. Middle school, high school.
Yeah.
So much self-doubt.
Yeah.
And insecurity.
Yeah, and think about it. Aren't you so happy me and you did not have social media as kids?
Honestly, I don't know how they're doing it, because they're pulled in so many different directions, trying to please everybody else, and maybe losing focus of what they should be doing instead of listening to all of these outside forces and factors.
You're constantly comparing. Constantly. When I missed a party in 8th grade or 9th grade, I didn't know I missed the party.
When you weren't invited to that birthday.
Right. It just happened, and a week went by and I didn't hear about it. Now you know what you missed because you see it. It's a billboard. It's right in front of you all the time. Comparison is so cancerous. I think social media is our modern day cigarette. I just don't think there's been enough time of people smoking for people to go, you know what? Lung cancer is skyrocketing. I wonder why. I think it's the cigarette. Mm-hmm. I think 30 years from now, the younger generation is going to be like, they gave their kids iPads at restaurants when they were 2 years old. How crazy were they? But we're just like, no, please be quiet. I want to eat my meal. Here's an iPad.
And don't talk. And nobody says anything to one another.
I know.
Social media is one thing. I think technology has positives. There's a place for it. Social media, on the other hand, I think you're right. We're going to look back on that and go, you gave all that information out there.
I know.
And you took people's advice you didn't even know, and you are listening to input from people that you really shouldn't be associating with.
Yeah, I kind of feel like my kids are going to get mad at me when they see some of the stuff I've put of them on social media. Mm-hmm. I've wondered, like, it's cute and funny, but I wonder, like, when they're 18, if they're like, hey, Dad, like, why'd you put that up? Yeah. I don't know, like, sometimes I try and think futuristic of what I put on social media and my website, even in my sermons. Like, I'm someone who when I teach, I've got to use personal stuff that's going on with me.
Well, I think that makes you more credible, though, too, because
I know,
share.
but my wife, she's like, if you share that story one more time, you're going to be in the doghouse. So I would love to come back and talk more on how you can have the hard conversation, but keep credibility and still be a safe person. Because there's 4 or 5 things that I'm going to kind of leave as a cliffhanger to have people come back on. How can you be a successful, safe person that is also holding them accountable, but also letting them feel like they matter and that their story is valid, but also letting them know, and I'll end with this, like there's a counselee I'm working with right now. We have a deadline. We have a deadline of 2 months for this person to share this hard news with their spouse. But I'm still a safe person, and I'm still someone that's going to love them, but they don't share. I told them I'm going to share. To share this. Like, I do not want to do this. I'm going to coach you to do it. But as a safe person, the safest way I can love you is giving you a deadline. And that's going to look so different depending on the situation and who the person is. So, next time we get together, let's talk more of mental health, how we can love people well, and how we can be a safe person.
And we're talking with Tim Wadsworth, who's youth pastor at North Hills Church. Contact information, please.
Yes. Personally, you can check me out at timwadsworth.com. That's WADSWORTH. Or you can go to alivestudentministry.com. If you have a middle or high school student, every Sunday night we gather, and you can find out more about what we do, why we do it, what's the purpose of having your kid in a youth group, which, by the way, we did that like 4 or 5 months ago. Why is it important to have your kid in community? Why is it important for them to come to youth groups? So you can go back and somehow listen to that. But alivestudentministry.com.
Good. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely.
And we look forward to you coming back.
Yes, thank you.
This is Heidi Aiken with Tim Wadsworth. Join me next week.
Well done.
Boom. You are, boom, 2540. I could not have asked for anything.
Nice.
And I said 10 words.